Another week of OWL, another week of wild results. Some great storylines and some interesting playoff scenarios now lie in the balance after some unexpected outcomes in week 2 of the summer stage. And now, because of it, a big weekend is ahead of us. Let's take a look at what's to come in week 3, as well as your weekly dose of ATP's garbage analysis. Starting out west, as usual, is the resurgent Spitfire versus the LA Gladiators on Friday afternoon. These two are on very different trajectories. London are super close to getting 10th place in the West, with their confidence consistently building after playing good on the rush comms, and now they play a Gladiator team who last we saw got reverse swept by the Valiant. They're adjusting to new tank play, and now that they've signed Cal at support, things are even weirder. The good news for Gladiators is they know exactly what London plans to do. The bad news? We don't know if they can stop it. I don't know how I feel about them trying to play the Ramatra into what London play. Every day is a different week, but if the Valiant could punish the Gladiators and marvel with positioning, imagine what the Spitfire could do. I low-key am leaning towards the Spitfire in a 3-2. They almost feel more trustworthy in a way, just given that we know what we're gonna get. If this game ends up being a close one, I think that London could gain the edge through control maps, and that just might be enough to end up surviving. Boston versus the Valiant. Expectations maybe aren't the highest here. The loss against London and the shock also not looking that good doesn't really do the Valiant any favors. There hasn't been any real progression in their play compared to the first week, and Boston are simply in a class of their own compared to the teams they just lost to, and they're ready to take their anger out on somebody after choking to Florida. The talent gap is just a bit too much here, so it's probably going to be a quick 3-0 for Boston in what should serve as nothing more than a warm-up. Atlanta Reign versus Florida Mayhem. Yeah, this one's gonna be the Western key match of the week. The Reign, who finally showed weakness, now have to play both the Mayhem and Boston in the same week, and Florida alone by themselves are a big-time pain. Their dive and support play isn't quite at the same level of Houston, let's say, but they do have that flexibility factor. Control maps with Rush could definitely go their way, just based off of what we saw with Atlanta last week. There's maybe some worries that the map pool and the crazy amount of prep may be a bit too much for Atlanta in this instance. It's a pretty tough ask to do well with two tough opponents on the horizon. My only issue here is I don't really know if the Mayhem are well-rounded enough to make this work. The Outlaws are basically all hands on deck at every position. Specifically, their support line is like the only one in the league that keeps pace with Atlanta. Florida's backline is great, but it's no shoe Violet, you know? And if you aren't totally locked in, you just won't beat this Atlanta team. It took Houston all they had, and they barely beat them. Part of me really wants to go with the upset here, but I can't. Atlanta are going to take this 3-1 in my opinion. The Reign are just super good in bounce back scenarios. They're going to adjust. I think they'll find their own way to win. Maybe it could be through avoiding Rush, maybe it's through reviewing the film, or perhaps playing more Hawk. Either way, I am expecting them to adjust, and I think that pressure of going undefeated now off their chest is going to make things even easier. Next is Justice versus Vancouver, and this one could also be a banger, as Heesang has finally arrived in Vancouver, so now he gets to play on normal ping. But the Justice happen to be a pretty tough opponent. Right now, with how map pools are going, the rush comps play a pivotal role both in the early and late game. And this playstyle obviously better suits the Justice. The Titans just look way better when they get to play fast on that dive comp, and the Justice look a lot more comfortable when Mirror gets to dominate on their Amatra. The Titans, in my opinion, could be playing at a disadvantage. The Justice have the control edge, and they match up pretty well on some of the other stuff too. Especially since Alpha E Flora is a pretty good matchup for Lenny Heesang. The Justice, in my opinion, have the slight edge, and I plan to take them in a 3-1. The Titans are a pretty worthy adversary, this is not going to be easy, but the Justice simply have a bit more working in their favor across the duration of a whole series, which is why I think they're more likely to win. Boston versus Atlanta. Another really tough game on the Reign schedule, where a top dog is looking to take them down. But you know, that's kind of how it goes when you're the best. You've got a pretty big target, and everybody wants a piece of you, so the pressure is now on you to purely stay on the top. The Reyna found that out the hard way against the Outlaws recently, and now, like I said before, they play two top teams back to back. This is a preparation nightmare, and there's a realistic chance they end up going 0-2 this week. But if that's gonna happen, I think it more so lies on Boston. Boston have a lot to prove themselves, as well as an inconsistent track record, and unlike the Mayhem, they're not nearly as versatile or good at rush. Their chances just feel a bit lower because of this, and they won't be able to necessarily capitalize on Atlanta's discomfort, and in a pure dive mirror from start to finish, they're just not gonna win. Their somber execution just isn't as clean, and Decay and Birdring sometimes have a habit of disappearing in the big moments against the big teams. If anybody's going to beat Atlanta Reign this week, it's more likely to be Florida. Atlanta are going to take this series 3-1 and survive the gauntlet. Boston just don't have it all pieced together yet. I don't entirely trust them, although I am hoping they prove me wrong. Vegas versus the Valiant. Alert! Alert! Potential toilet bowl inbound. Fasten your seatbelts. This is not a drill. The two worst teams in the Overwatch League are going head to head. The ultimate meme. Two dead franchises fighting for their lives. Although Vegas showed flashes with Knife and now they added Finale to their main roster, they're still kind of unproven and on ping and relatively new, so the Valiant should be favored as they've nearly won a couple of solid games this year and they're a lot more experienced and just have a better sense of how to navigate the chaos. The Valiant in all likelihood would win this somewhat convincingly, but I'm gonna manifest a 5-map toilet bowl. Screw Vegas and the Valiant getting better. Give me all the memes and the terrible gameplay. Inject it straight into my veins. The tradition of the toilet bowl must live on, and we're long overdue. Florida versus the Justice. Honestly, the Justice are kind of just a worse version of the Mayhem. Decently flexible, but less star power. They manage at DPS, I'd say, but maybe not the other places. Someone is just a more impactful tank player, and I don't think we can underestimate how much better the Mayhem could be on the dive comps. I kind of see the Mayhem winning this one pretty handily. Maybe they could drop a map just because there's a better team to prepare for, but I honestly think this one will be kind of boring. Vegas versus London. If this was the Spitfire from a couple of weeks ago, maybe Vegas would have a shot, but London recently have been reborn. They know what they gotta do. It's time to be Chads and cause chaos with the Rhine. And against a Vegas team who are still getting used to the standard, let alone the wacky, that could be a problem. Things are going too fast, I feel, and the foundation just hasn't taken form yet. This early on, in a partnership against a tight squad like London in a rush comp sounds like a disaster, so let's take London in a sweep. Closing out the West is Gladiators versus Vancouver. Once again, I find myself wondering if the Gladiators are okay. So many unanswered questions with a weird adjustment period going on. Can they play around Marvel better? Can they let Kevster cook without having him play May in the Sombra? Are you gonna let your carry do his thing and not be weird? Like, that's what the Gladiators have to do if they want to win. But even then, it's very up in the air. The Titans have a lot more consistency, at least recently, both on tank and support, so they might be the safer option. But just knowing how weird the summer stage has been, maybe that means the Glads actually win this. If the last 2 weeks have taught me anything, it's that everything I know is a lie. So 3-2 Gladiators. The Copio machine has entered warp speed. I refuse to believe that the Gladiators are going to go winless for a second straight week. It just doesn't sound right with a team led by Kevster. On to the East, where first is going to be Infernal versus Dallas, and they're like the only consistent teams in the region, so it's most definitely the biggest game of the week there. Here's the Fuel's chance to actually prove themselves, to show that they're truly back and at a brand new level after the break. And they've looked pretty good so far in all fairness. They've cleaned up their dive and their DPS look a lot more comfortable, but is that enough to beat Soul Infernal based off the information that we have? Well, that might be a stretch, as Seoul have been the most complete team in the Eastern region. They've dominated for countless weeks, and I don't know if there's a point in picking against them until they actually lose. In my opinion, Infernal are going to win this 3-1, because for one, they're just the clear-cut frontrunner of this region, but also, Dallas aren't exactly super proven yet. I don't know how their dive's gonna do against a team of Infernal's caliber, and Dallas have only really beaten like Shanghai and Contenders teams, so I'm not exactly convinced that they're at the number 1 level yet. Dreamers versus the Dynasty. Part of me wants to believe that Seoul are gonna lose, as it only feels natural for them to continue to struggle given how their season has gone so far. The only problem is, I don't know if Dreamers have it in them. I think if Seoul stop playing so much silly things and they stick to their dive, that they could probably overcome Dreamers here. Dreamers got absolutely abused by Clean Tracer play last week, and Prophet has looked real good lately. Seoul and Dreamers are both pretty weird, so I'm gonna say that a 5-map banger makes the most sense, with the Dynasty coming out on top. But I really don't know anymore with the East, man. The middle and the bottom is really blurred, and I get the feeling that a lot of Seoul games are gonna be super close. That just feels like how their season has gone so far. So win or loss here, I think their fans are about to go through some serious cardiac arrest. Spark versus Poker Face. I don't know, man. I just don't know. The Spark are such a weird team, and it really will depend on if they wake up on the right side of the bed. The Spark are definitely, at the very least though, the better team, and I'd imagine that they're probably going to bounce back eventually, since they got a lot of those early stage jitters out of the way already. So maybe Spark end up getting it out of their system and they come back strong. Plus, Pokerface are maybe a little less scary since Finale left for Vegas and he's arguably been their best player as of late, and I don't really know how they can play without him. So let's say a 3-1 for the Spark. Shy and Leave losing to a Contenders team would be absolutely ridiculous, and I refuse to believe that the scriptwriters would play such a cruel joke on us. O2 versus Dreamers. This is a pretty big wild card. O2 somehow won last week against the Dynasty, and the Dreamers did look noticeably worse. And given the similarities in playstyle, O2 actually have a serious chance in this one. If the DPS step up like they did against Seoul, this becomes super doable. The thing is, it's difficult to know for certain if O2 can sustain this level of play. I still don't know entirely how I feel about O2, even after getting that win in this kind of meta. It still feels kind of weird to me, and Dreamers are maybe just a bit more proven, and I'm a little more confident in their DPS and rush comps, so I'm gonna say that Dreamers win this 3-2. Coming into this stage, I was a certified O2 Blast Doubter, and I'm not gonna budge after just one win. Dreamers to the moon. Guangzhou Charge versus Dallas Fuel. Given the, well, interesting week the Charge just went through, watching them is gonna be quite the spectacle. Without Choice A1 on this team, the Charge could have a potential serious hole on their DPS / playmaking, and I don't know if, replacing him with a Chinese player to make the team happier if Choice A1 is apparently toxic is gonna do you any good. Choice A1 was such a pivotal point of this team. He did so much for them. The only real potential upside with this move is Jinmu is a solid Sombra player, so that issue could end up resolving, but this early on, I really don't know if it's gonna pan out. It may not always be the best formula for them to win, without Choice A1 there to carry on the Tracer. I just don't know. The synergy could be better, maybe the team is happier overall and they're in a more positive mindset because Choi and Piggy were maybe causing problems. You can speculate all you want, but regardless, now they actually have to show results, and against a Dallas team that has looked solid so far, I don't know if I trust that. These moves are very sudden, it's been done in a panic, they're trying to save their season before it's too late, getting rid of their coaches and their Korean players, and I kind of feel like it may be too late at this point. So, Dallas Fuel win 3-0. Infernal versus Panthera. I apologize, Panthera. I wasn't familiar with your game. You possess more potential than I gave you credit for, and you're a decent underdog. But against Seoul Infernal, aka the best team in the region by far, it's just not gonna happen. Nobody can stand in their way right now, let alone some run-of-the-mill Contenders team, This one's gotta be an easy sweep for Infernal, as it's just a pure team gap basically throughout this whole region, and that's all there really is to say. Spark versus Shanghai. The Dragons certainly intrigue me here. They're definitely starting to improve. It's slow and steady, but you can notice the difference. And the Spark haven't exactly been lighting up the scoreboard as of late. point. I think if there was ever a time for Shanghai to upset the Spark, it's right now. Shy Sombra has been up and down lately, and if Hisu really turns up and he shows up for this matchup, it could easily go the distance. They've got the DPS, main support is less of a problem when they're up against Langsa, it's a pretty decent matchup. Although, the Dragons are a little unproven for me to confidently predict them to beat the Spark. Spark are just more reliable overall, and they have way more playmaking potential on Winston, and I doubt they're going to continue to struggle after what happened last week. They've gotten it out of their system, I'm a firm believer of this, so while a good game would be preferred, I think the Spark should be taking care of this in a 3-1. O2 Blast versus Panthera. Rinse and repeat what I said about their match with Dreamers. This one could go either way. The thing with O2 and Panthera is they're both inflexible. O2 can't play dive, and Panthera can't play rush. Certain control and hybrid maps, for example, could look really good for O2, but Panthera's dive could be problematic on the other map types. Honestly, the result really may depend on what maps we get on that day. And since we don't find out until the day of, I guess I'm gonna favor Panthera in a very narrow 3-2. By the numbers, I think there's more good dive maps in the pool, but if they were to get unlucky, this probably goes the other way. Maps will probably be a huge deciding factor here, and I think we'll know which way this game goes by game time. Dynasty versus Poker Face. Originally, I had Poker Face getting the upset, but after losing Finale, I've changed my tune. Downgrading to Valentine doesn't sound all that great. When this game reaches its height, we're gonna see the Dynasty DPS be the more trustworthy ones to clutch up and close this sucker out. However, in tradition of Dynasty playing nail-biters for whatever reason, let's say a 3-2. Dynasty do have a habit of playing down to their competition, and Poker Face still are pretty decent in spite of some potential DPS deficiencies. In this particular matchup, Muse could be really good against Belos Rhea, and their backline definitely holds their own. There's a realistic chance that Poker Face win this game, and it's going to take all the Dynasty have to pull through, and in the end I think they will, just by cleaning up a few mistakes from last week, and depending on their DPS to lead the way. Charge versus the Dragons. Basically, the same thing that I had to say about the Dallas series applies to this one for the Charge. What are they going to do? What are they going to show us with this sudden flip to Jinmu at flex DPS? Is the Sombra play going to be enough to keep up with the Shanghai Dragons, who are slowly improving over time and are starting to build up their confidence? I'm not too sure. There may be a small adjustment period as they get used to having Jinmu in there instead, and adjusting to what his playstyle is like and what his hero pool is centered around. Like, the Sombra's great for him, but maybe not the best on other things, like, you know, his other good heroes are Genji and Pharah and whatnot, and I don't really know if that translates to success in the current meta, especially because the Charge don't have a lot of those star playmakers. They're basically the Chengdu Hunters from a couple of years ago without leave, and without that true bona fide superstar, that centerpiece option, I don't know if it can really hold together against some of these other star-level DPS players like Hisu and Viper respectively. I can maybe see the vision if Choi Se-won really was causing some issues behind the scene, but either way, it's still going to be an uphill battle. Even if your mindset is slightly better, you still haven't looked all that great as of late, you don't have that true superstar playmaker anymore, the Charge have a lot to prove, and I'm just not ready to trust them yet, so I'm going with Shanghai in a 3-1 victory. And that's gonna do it. That's my little preview and prediction segment for the matches in Week 3. Finishing strong the next couple of weeks is super important, and these teams are about to push each other to their absolute limit. Be sure to let me know which games you're looking forward to watching down in the comments below, and be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more Overwatch League content. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.